Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we are taking a look at the Reate Skelton Blade Works Tibia. This is my full review and discussion, so we'll spend a little more time and go into a little more detail than we do in a quick first impressions. I've been watching Jim Skelton for a long time. Back in the day, he was one of the few that was doing higher end custom knives. There were a couple other channels, but they weren't, Jim does a really, really nice job of presentation. And so he was useful in that he could give you a really good look at some really high-end stuff. And that was great. I've never been a custom knife guy. I'm never going to be a custom knife guy, but it's always nice to sort of know what's going on in that segment of the industry because it always trickles down into the production side, where I am a little more interested and where most of the knives that I'm going to have on this channel will come from. I've had some customs on the channel. Don't get me wrong. I'm happy to check one out, but I'm not going to ever be like a custom knife collector. Just not, doesn't appeal to me. Anyway, Jim gave access to sort of that side of the marketplace and had a lot of good information. And so I've watched tons and tons of his videos. In fact, it's probably mostly his fault that one of my first higher end knives was the Microtech DOC. I did get it in the second gen after the famous FU clip had been modified. Anyway, a few years ago, Jim started making custom knives himself, and I don't love every single thing he does, but certainly the Tibia was an appealing design. He did another one, a collaboration with, oh, come on, Kevin, think about it. Anyway, the Occipital, I think, was the name of the other collaboration, and it was with Bark River. There we go. This is built by Reate. It's very faithful to the design, and the quality is really, really on point. So, very, very nice EDC fixed blade. High, lots of high points for style. I think Jim has done a nice job with this design, and of course Reate has done a really, really good job building it. So what I want to do, I want to take a little bit of a different approach this time. I've got a number of comparisons that I want to share with you. So what I'm going to do is give you a quick rundown of the stuff I like about this knife, then bring in some comparisons and allow that to sort of facilitate the discussion for the few things that I'm not in love with. All right, because there are a couple little things here that I wish were slightly different. So let's go ahead and start working our way through the list. I like a few things quite a lot about this. First off, this blade. I really, really like the blade design. It's stylish, it's interesting. And a challenge on a fixed blade is to come up with something that's interesting and a little bit different. And I think Jim has done a nice job of that overall. I like the fuller, I like the satin, I like the stonewash. The little thumb swale here works well for practical purposes. I could have it just a little bit extended. I know I'm not supposed to be talking about stuff I don't like yet, but it's okay in this position. I feel like if it was just a little bit longer, the ergonomics would get a little bit better, at least for my hand. I like the materials, M390, carbon fiber, full tang, all of that is definitely good to go. I like the size as well. Now, this is something a little bit different. We've got a lot of blade here. I guess not a little bit different. He's sort of following in the vein of the Bradford Guardian, where you've got a lot of blade and you try to use some of the blade to make up for the limited handle. There are a number of EDC style fixed blades that do that kind of thing, and I think it is a really good option to give you a lot of utility, to shrink it down to make it very carryable, but still allow for a large useful blade. All right. So I think that sort of approach is definitely a good one, and a lot of my favorite EDC fixed blades take that particular approach. When we get to comparisons, I've got a few here that don't. I specifically included those so you could see some of the alternatives. But I do think that's a nice way of getting a good size EDC fixed blade. The other thing I like here is this sheath. Again, it's a little bit different, but it's highly workable, right? Having the little clasp there, generally it stays out of the way. I will say every once in a while I've had to sort of fight with it or get my finger up there to push it out of the way. but overall, I like the way the sheath and the retention is done. It's kind of a nice change from some of what we often see. And I think it matches the flow of the knife. You know, the knife feels a little higher end, a little classier, a little more gentlemanly. And the leather is, I think, a better match for that than Kydex would be, unless you did something special with the Kydex. Anyway, I think the sheath is well suited to the knife overall, and very functional. We'll come back to the sheath a little bit later, but for now, I think I've pretty well run through most of the things that I really, really like. I do want to hit on, the decorative handle screws. I should have mentioned those. This is a really nice touch, as is the carbon fiber. You don't often see sort of a gentleman's EDC fixed blade, but that's really kind of what this is. And it's a cool offering, and it's nicely done. And the screws definitely add some pop to it. And of course, having screws means you could change the carbon fiber out, although I like the carbon fiber quite a lot. So now that we've kind of run through everything that I like, let's go ahead and do a quick rundown on the size here. So this is 7¼ inches overall. The blade length, if you measure from here, is about 4¼ but if you just measure cutting edge, you can see there's a bit of a difference there. Cutting edge is 3 7/8, so there's about that 1/4 inch difference there, which does kind of allow your finger to get a little extra space there, give a little more real estate for your hand. The handle itself is only 3 1/16, so it's basically 3 inches of grip. And I guess 3 inches of grip material, you end up getting about 3 1/4 maybe by the time you kind of get your index finger up into this very deep choil at the front. The other thing I like about this is the positioning of the blade, so that the blade is down here kind of in front of your fingers, allowing you, if you're going to work on like a flat surface, you can kind of reach what you're cutting. 4.7 ounces for the knife itself. When you add the sheath, that's another 2 ounces. So what you're actually carrying is 6.7 ounces. Now it's carried on your belt, and I think that's an important distinction to make with a lot of EDC fixed blades. I don't know about you guys, but when I put a knife in my pocket, I can notice it much more compared to when I put it on my belt, right? A knife on my belt is hardly noticeable. Even when it gets up to around 8 or 9 ounces, it's not that big of a deal. Where in my pocket, if I put an 8 or 9 or 10 ounce knife in my pocket, you really, really notice that right away. Okay, so the other thing I want to do very quickly while we are, before we move into the comparisons, is just give you a quick look at how this knife fits on a belt and how it carries for me, just so you can kind of understand that this is how it's sort of set up to carry. And then I'll talk about, I'll tell you right now, I carried this. I very specifically wanted to sort of test the convenience factor of this knife. So I went ahead and carried it every single day for a week, just to sort of say that I did it, right? Often days that wasn't really the knife I planned to carry, even when it wasn't perfectly appropriate, I still did, just so I could, kind of get some time with this on my belt. And I have to say, overall, it's pretty well done. I didn't have, one of the problems I thought I might have is getting this in and out of the sheath easily. I thought that would be a struggle because of that retention strap, but it was fine. So let me just roll over to a quick little shot of discussion of me getting this in and out of pocket. And I'll tuck in my shirt so you can see the whole thing, although normally I would wear my shirt untucked. Okay, so you can see the sheath pretty easily there right now. I've got it unclipped because I'm going to put the knife in so you can see kind of how that goes. And notice I do kind of get my index finger up there to move that out of the way, but then the knife does go in pretty nice and easy. All right, now again, I've got my shirt tucked in so you can see, but just to give you an idea, without it being tucked in, it really does disappear. And I can get the knife out again pretty quickly and pretty easily. So there you go. Okay, so now that you've seen this go in and out of the sheath and you've been able to check out my phenomenal fashion sense, let's go and get into some comparisons. I have a bunch of fixed blades here, most of which I think are sized appropriately for EDC, and some of which will illustrate sort of some of the things I like and dislike about this knife. So let's start off with a couple that are just sort of, placeholders, common knives. So I've got a couple here. This one is the tops cut for. You can see it's set up for a similar style of carry, either scout carry or kidney carry. It is bigger and more designed to be sort of a tactical knife, right? This is not so much about EDC. Very, very thick blade stock, all right, thicker than the Tibia for sure. I mean, it is designed to be carried on your person all the time, but this is not the knife that you're going to be, you know, slicing up apples with or anything. It's very, very thick, very heavy duty. It's primarily about survival or self-defense. And so not totally comparable here. You can see though, they've gone with quite a bit bigger. The blade length itself is not all that different, but there's quite a bit more handle real estate, and that is noticeable. Okay, this does feel pretty comfortable in hand, and if you did have to use this and get some work done, you'd need that handle because that's a thick blade and you're gonna have to be able to apply a fair amount of force, okay? But this represents sort of the tactical side of an EDC fixed blade, and so I wanted to throw it in there. This knife is a little bigger, a little heftier, but again, on a belt, it's not all that different. Other than the blade grind is very, very different. This is all about toughness and durability. This is a little more refined and going to slice a little better for you, which actually I would argue is a little nicer for EDC because I'm not usually like batoning firewood and stuff with my EDC knife. Another knife I want to bring in here is one that you are all familiar with on the channel. The Lion Steel M4 is far and away my very favorite fixed blade, and it's not all that much bigger, right? It's about 8¼ inches. I have and do EDC this knife quite a lot. It is very, very well done. And this does bring up a challenge for the Tibia. And that is, you know, the Tibia is what I would consider like an occasional use knife. It's a knife you're going to pull out to open a package or something along those lines. It's not the knife to EDC if you feel that you're going to be, I don't know, doing survival tasks or skinning an animal or something along those lines. It's just not designed for that. It's very much more an EDC, potentially self-defense fixed blade. And in that role, it's very good, but it does not have all of the versatility that the Lion Steel offers. Now, it carries, right? This is, of course, the leather sheath. You could buy a Kydex sheath and set it up for scout carry, the Lion Steel up for scout carry, and still be under the price point on the Tibia, which is like $300, right? So the Lion Steel is going to be very, you know, I have to share my bias here, guys. I'm rarely going to look at any fixed blade that I'm going to like better than the Lion Steel M4. It is just my favorite all-around fixed blade. I love everything about it. And so the Tibia doesn't beat it in my mind. I like the versatility that I get from the Lion Steel and the ability to do a little bit more. Funnily enough, even though this is a much larger knife, it has a shorter blade. Let me grab a couple of more. Here is the fairly recent Civivi Elementum. Now, again, a larger knife for sure. I happen to have both versions of this. So I've got the sort of more outdoor geared Elementum, and then I've got the, I don't know what, tactical EDC geared Elementum. The handle is, again, going to be quite noticeable. All right, you can choke up on this. All right, we've got D2 steel and we've got 10 CR15 or something like that, which is sort of a BG10 equivalent here. So not as high-end materials, not nearly as high-end a price point, but wanted to throw them in there. One, I know a lot of people are familiar with these, and of course, these represent a much more traditional approach that gives you kind of an idea of how something like this compares to you know, the average sort of everyday knife that someone's going to throw on their belt. A very non-traditional approach that takes the other option is this Civivi. And honestly, I've forgotten the name of it, guys. I apologize for that. But this Civivi tries to be very minimalist. Instead of emphasizing the blade, though, it emphasizes the handle. So I've actually got quite a bit of real estate. This is reasonably comfortable in hand. And then I've got this smaller blade. Now, useful blade, interesting blade, no question about that, but not nearly as substantial as you can see. So this represents a completely opposite approach. And there are a few knives that take this approach where the handle, it's all about, let's make a comfortable handle so somebody can really get some work done. Okay, and we'll minimize the blade a little bit. Again, this is Kydex. This has one of the T-clips. Civivi is working with Bob Trezola to implement those T-clips on a bunch of their models. I've got another knife here that takes a similar approach to the Tibia, and that is the PMP Bulldog. Now, very heavy duty, super thick blade stock here on the Bulldog, if you check that out. D2 steel versus M390, so not comparable materials wise, but this is the knife that's all about the blade. There's a ton of blade here and a fairly limited amount of handle, okay? And like the Tibia, that does affect ergonomics. This is not the most comfortable knife, and if I was gonna do, if I was like surviving, or if I was gonna have to do a ton of work with my knife, this maybe wouldn't be my first pick, although it's not the worst thing. The handle is reasonable, it's just not the very best for a ton of hard work. The last knife I want to bring in, and I think this is the most important knife here, this is the Kaiser Harpoon from Maverick Blade Works. So you can get a custom harpoon, which would be more similar in price point to the Tibia here. This is a knife that I want to spend a little bit of time on because it's very similar. So similar blade length. All right, the Tibia is just a little bit longer, but notice that the harpoon adds, a little bit to the handle, really about, there you go, if I kind of put them on top of each other, about 3/4 of an inch there. And that 3/4 of an inch makes a huge difference. Ergonomically, this knife just feels a lot better than the Tibia. And that's why I didn't get into this right away. But if you would add even 1/2 an inch to this knife, it would be a completely different ball game. I would probably be singing its praises. The other thing the Harpoon does is has this full flat grind. So if I were going to make any changes to this knife to make it just absolutely ideal for me, I would add a little bit of length to the handle, 1/2 an inch. I would take this grind and just take it right to the fuller, and I would lose the holes. The holes are not a bad thing. I don't hate them by any means, and I still like this design an awful lot. I don't like this one any less, though, even though it has this little bit of extra handle. And I like the flat grind. You can notice I have a bunch of cardboard cut up just for this purpose. Between these two, you can notice a difference. The thinner blade slides through that cardboard a little easier than the thicker blade on the Tibia, and I don't think you would notice that if you just moved that grind line a little bit higher, right? They're both quite thin behind the edge, and so it's not the biting in that you notice the difference. All right, both of them bite in pretty well. It's about here where I start having to apply more pressure compared to doing the same thing with the Harpoon. So those two little changes, or those few little changes, I think would be very welcome. The last thing that I want to touch on, notice this Kydex is not well done, right? It's set up for scout carry. I've carried it this way. It's fine. It's not ideal, but it definitely does the job. I like this a little bit more. It does carry a little bit more comfortable as far as I'm concerned. However, what I think both of these could benefit from is a hard metal bent over clip that I can clip onto a waistband, or I can clip on, I thought I had one somewhere here, but there are some clip options out there. Think of the clip that's on, say, a tape measure, right? Something like that, a little bit more substantial than that because you want a little more retention than your average tape measure has. But think about the weight of a tape measure, and most of the time that clip works fine. So a little bit of extra strength, but a similar approach. And I've said that about every single fixed blade I think I've ever reviewed on this channel. I would like a little more versatility in placement, because this is fine, but I may want to put it on my back. I may want to put it, upright. I may want to strap it to a pack, or, put it on a backpack or something else, or on my satchel bag. I could strap this onto a satchel with molly webbing. There are a number of options that I would possibly want to use with a fixed blade, and I just like that versatility. Okay, Jim made a choice to set this up for a specific way of carrying, and that's not wrong. Okay, at least he thought it through. Okay, and that's more than I can say for some sheath designs. I feel like they're not thought through well at all. So he did think it through, but he only gave me the one option. I would have liked to have a couple of others. All right, so there you go, guys. Overall, the one other point I need to make here is one about value, and this is an expensive knife. Remember that it's from Reate. Remember that the materials are a little higher end. I could probably be a little more excited about this knife at 250, between 2 and 250, I think would have been probably perfect. So it's a little high at $300, but it's a limited edition. And, I think this is going to be more for fans of Jim Skelton, and they're going to be willing to pay that extra $50 because of their interest in his work. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We will talk to you soon.